everybody. Good morning. Welcome in across the continent. My name is Jesse, and I am here with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. I know we've got some new faces in the crowd today, including our speaker. And so if you are new to us, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world through over 40 broadcasts like this every single month. So if you want to learn about neuroscience or particle physics or conservation, we had baby sloths on just last week. There's all sorts of exciting stuff on the go. You can check us all out at exploringbytheseat.com. And everything we do goes to YouTube Live and stays there forever. So if you want to check out this program in like 3 weeks or like 3 years, you can just go and do just that. We'll look so much younger then. Please do look back at programs, and that's when I used to be young. It was great. Today, I want to know we are going to have a little Kahoot together. So between our talk and our Q&A, you are going to do a 4-question quiz with us if you'd like. Test your understanding, have a little bit of fun. You can pull that up with that game pin at kahoot.it. I'll put that in the chat for everyone in a minute as well. Today, too, we are continuing a really fun series in conjunction with the folks at the Western University Institute for Earth and Space Exploration. They have helped us make our space programs free all year long. We hung out with Cass Marion talking about her amazing adventures in the Arctic. We hung out with a NASA explorer and roboticist, Abigail Freeman and Caitlin Crawford, building robots to go explore other worlds. And today, we are going to hang out with Jeff, who's going to take us on a journey to the moon. We're going to learn about our neighbor in the sky, our natural satellite. We're going to learn about that thing that we all see every day, but maybe some of us don't know so much about. Well, Jack is going to change our minds about that. And so without further ado, I'm going to stop talking. Jack, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining us today. And
Hi.
It's so great to have you. We have I was telling you before, 400 kids from coast to coast today. We've both got our moon. Wait, where is it? Or my moon globe ready. You've got your moon globe ready. One of these places we point. So like we couldn't be in better hands to blow our minds. I'm so excited.
Okay. All right. I'll take it away. Hi, my name's Jack. I'm a geologist, and my area of focus is the moon, as you might have guessed. I use satellite imagery and also samples of rocks to study it. And because the moon is mostly covered in craters, most of what I do involves studying craters. And right now I'm doing a PhD at the University of Western Ontario with my supervisor, Dr. Gordon Azinski. Everyone just calls him Oz. I've got a collage here of all these different things that sort of shows what I do. Sometimes I study rocks using microscopes or computer programs, and sometimes I make maps of other worlds, like this 3D map up at the top. Last year, I traveled to a big meteor crater in northern Canada that has rocks that are very similar to the moon. And we can use this place potentially to train astronauts who are going to land on the moon in a few years. But it's been a long road to get here, and there's a long road ahead for me. I had no idea that I was going to end up studying rocks. People asked me when I was a kid, what did I want to be when I grew up? I don't know. I just shrugged. I just kept trying things, and it often felt like I was making big mistakes and doing the wrong thing. And I worried about the future a lot. And other people, I'd see them, they seem to have everything figured out. So looking back now, I want to share a few lessons with you that I learned along the way that helped me get to this place and doing these things that I love doing, and maybe it'll help you. So first of all, I grew up on a small dairy farm in Caledon, Ontario. My siblings and I would climb dusty beams in the barn and balance over the hay and ride dirt bikes in the forest or skate on the frozen creek in the winter. My parents worked hard to encourage our curiosity. There were science lessons all around us if we're patient enough to listen. In particular, I really loved space. That's me there in the spaceship. I drew that picture. And there was one particular job I wanted to have when I grew up, and that was that. But, I mean, like 4 people get to be astronauts in Canada. How could I ever be perfect enough to be chosen for that? I wasn't one of the kids who got perfect grades in every single thing. I mean, sometimes I didn't even get good grades. I remember as a little boy being woken up by my dad in the middle of the night, dressing up in so many layers and crunching through the snow in the dark to peer up at the constellations and look for shooting stars. My mom, she had her own way. I remember once she pulled me out of grade school in the middle of class and took me to the Ontario Science Centre on a Tuesday, just to remind me that the point of school is learning and not just doing the work or getting a certain grade. Learning is something you do, not something that happens to you. And that really helped me to see school differently. Thanks to my parents, I could say, I'm here to do my best. And it's okay if sometimes I don't get perfect, or even good. There's more to school than just getting a certain mark. Now, I don't want you to think that life on the farm was just relaxing and running around. There were long days and hard work. Sometimes I might have told you I hated it. Heaving dusty 40-pound hay bales around in the summer sun, or getting manure splattered right on your face while you're shoveling it, or driving a tractor in circles for hours and hours and hours and hours. It's not what I would call fun, but it was honest. All that hard work that made me sweat and swear, it helped keep the farm that I loved going. It mattered. It was meaningful. And the reason that I'm starting to talk about the moon by talking about farming is that the first lesson I learned that helped me get to where I am today, I learned on that farm. And it's this: even if you get your dream job, it's going to be hard sometimes. It's going to be boring sometimes. You might have bad coworkers. You might have to sit and stare at a computer or freeze in the rain all day long. But if it matters to you, it'll be worth doing. I didn't like shoveling manure, but I was doing it so the cows had fresh bedding, to sleep and be healthy. It didn't matter if I loved doing it or not, because what I was doing was meaningful. And I like to say, find the manure you don't mind shoveling. When I first went to university, it wasn't for science. I did a degree in English and creative writing. What happens when I lost interest in science because I found that my science classes, when I took them, they'd gotten boring. It was just about putting answers down on assignments. When I was studying literature and culture and history, I was able to ask deep questions and explore and follow my curiosity so far that I was able to win awards for it. It appealed to my curiosity the way that exploring the farm did as a kid. And here's an example. I learned the world is full of stories hidden behind what seems like boring normal facts. For instance, it's a fact that that's a picture of a cow, right? It's a cow. But if it's on a plate, it's not called a cow, it's called beef. Well, why? Why is it that? Right? It's the same with a pig. If we cook the pig, why do we stop calling it a pig and start calling it pork? Well, if you think about the way it sounds for a little bit, you might start to notice that the word beef sounds an awful lot like the French word bœuf, and the word pork sounds an awful lot like the French word porc. Did our word for the food come from the French? Well, the answer is yes. Almost 1,000 years ago, France invaded England and took over. And that meant that all the people ruling England were now French. And the rich and powerful people talked in French. And they talked about the food they ate using French words, bœuf and porc, and also mouton and poulet. The peasants, though, they were still speaking English, and they were farmers who raised the animals. And over time, the English language picked up the French words for the food and kept the English words for the animals. There's this huge chapter in the history of a language that we're all speaking, hidden right on our plates, but we have to be willing to look. It's that kind of thinking that after I finished my English degree, it started bringing me toward geology. I realized this connected my love of questions, my love of stories, and my love of being outside getting bitten by bugs all in one place. You see, geology is about finding the stories that are hidden in rocks. What looks like a boring gray lump splits open and reveals a leaf from 100 million years ago. You can still see the little veins. You can see the textures in it there. I wanted to know the history of the world and know its story. I wanted to know how mountains formed. But there was a big problem. You see, I wanted to be a writer before, so I didn't have the right credits. I needed to go back and take high school math, high school chemistry, high school biology, high school physics, all over again, just to be able to start university all over again. It took me 7 years. That's almost as long as all of grade school. It was hard. I had to study all the time. I had tests again and exams again, and I made mistakes, and sometimes I got bad marks, and I had to redo something, and I never had much money. Sometimes I didn't think I could make it. But you know, it mattered to me. And also, I started making friends who also like geology and who could support me, and we could support each other through the tough times. And this brings me to the second lesson I learned along the way that's really helpful. When I was doing fieldwork up at the Kamastaston meteor crater, which is in northern Labrador in Canada, I got to meet people of the Innu First Nation. The Innu have cared for the lands up there for 9,000 years, and they helped us because they were able to share their guidance about how to work at the crater and how to be safe and they shared their stories about their past. They even brought us fresh caught fish right out of the lake. You see, the Innu have faced challenges over the years I would make any person give up and just lie down on the ground and say, that's it, I give up. But the Innu don't face challenges alone. They told us how important community is to them. That's the source of their strength. And this is the lesson that I took. It is important to be resilient. It's important to be smart. It's important to be tough. But by yourself, you're just one person. Together, by listening to each other's stories and helping out, we can do things that seem impossible. Speaking of stories, I want to tell you a story. The moon is almost as old as the Earth. Right when the Earth was still super hot and new, another planet crashed into it and sent materials spraying up into space. Here's a simulation of it. You can see this other planet crash into the Earth, and all this material goes blasting off into space. Now, over time, gravity pulled most of it back down, and you can watch this. You'll see that a bunch of this stuff kind of blobs together and falls back down into the Earth. But there on the right side, do you see that little blob? Right there. That blob stayed in space. And that eventually became our moon. At first, the moon was just an ocean of magma, all molten and super hot. But over time, of course, it cooled down, and then the molten magma started to freeze. You know how ice crystals float in water? Well, some mineral crystals float in magma, and so as the molten magma ocean of the moon cooled, the mineral crystals started to grow, and some were heavy, and they sank all the way down, and some of them were light, and they floated up to the surface. The floating ones piled up, bloop, 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 on the surface until they closed in the magma ocean and made the moon's crust. So when you look up at the moon at night, the bright white areas that you see, those are the original crust of the moon from back when it first formed. And the dark areas, those are lavas that came out more recently. The Earth's original crust, when it first solidified, it's long gone. We have an atmosphere and wind and rain and plants and erosion that breaks the rocks down and washes them into the oceans. We also have continental plates, and when they move, they lift mountains in the sky, and they make volcanoes, and they sometimes force the rocks down into the mantle. All of this broke down the Earth's original crust and recycled it into different rocks. So the oldest rocks we can actually get to, if we want to study what the Earth and the solar system were like at the very beginning, they're on the moon. But where should we go? Where on the moon? You see, when humans went to the moon the first time, it was very dangerous. They didn't have advanced computers to help them land like we have today. They were steering their landers down by hand. They had to find wide, flat places with lots of sunlight in order to land safely. They also had to land on the near side of the moon so they could have radio contact with the Earth, so they could see the Earth. And if you look in this picture, those 6 little stars, those are the only places where humans have ever landed. Almost every sample from the moon that we have comes from those 6 spots. Now I ask you, do you think that if we took samples from just these 6 places on Earth that you'd know every single thing about the geology of the whole world? No. As a scientist, you have to be careful about where you pick your samples. Sometimes you just have to go where it's safe. That's okay. But if you're given the choice, you have to think very carefully about where to go. The moon rocks that the Apollo astronauts brought back had no water in them. And so the scientists who studied these thought, okay, well, that means the whole moon has no water. It's just a dry, dusty desert of rocks. But they were wrong. You see, one sec. Drink of water. At the north and the south poles of the moon, where no mission has ever gone yet, there are deep, dark shadows inside craters and behind mountains where the sun never shines. Because those places are permanently dark, they're super cold. I'm talking colder than brain freeze. In those dark places, water ice is never melted by the sun. It stays there. And modern-day scientists, using satellites that orbit around the moon, have actually discovered that there is for sure water ice in those dark corners of the South Pole. How did they do that? So when I started out in grad school here at Western, I was doing a mapping project of some crater on the moon that hadn't been studied very much. Now, my supervisor, he's a really good guy, but he doesn't have enough money to send me all the way to the moon. And so I had to use remote sensing. And that means we're taking data from the satellites around the moon and trying to figure out what that can tell us about the moon that we can't see with just our eyes. I collected different kinds of data and I stacked them in layers like this, and I could turn them on and off in different software, and I could combine them and change them and help me to see things that you can't see if you just look at the moon. Using the data, I can make a map like this that shows the landscape of the moon in 3D. Here I've given it colors to show which areas are really high up, which is red, and which are really low, which is blue. Or maybe you could see which areas are the steepest. So the red, you see red or yellow, that's very steep. And if it's kind of blue, it's kind of flat, right? This allows you to see things that you might not pick out in a picture. Like, I don't know if any of you noticed this half circle here. You see the ridge? That's the outline of the old crater I was studying, right? And it becomes clear when you can use these layers. If you want to, you can play around with real data like this. Satellite data is collected on a place called the Lunar Quick Map. Now, some of it's a little confusing, but there's just buttons you click on and off, and you can turn on different layers, and you can see different things about the moon. You can explore and see, maybe you figure something out for yourself. Right here in this example, I've got the colors to show what's high and low, and I found a geologic map, and I plopped it on. And you can see the Earth in the background. So the other scientists, not me, that proved that there was water ice, they did this because water ice, you can see through it, right? You hold the ice cube, you can see right through it. The light goes right through it. Well, there are certain wavelengths that your eyes can't see, that are invisible, that get absorbed by the ice. They go in and they don't come back. But moon rocks will bounce that light back like a mirror. So these scientists, they downloaded data from satellites. They did this remote sensing, and they put it into their programs, and they looked at the data. They were able to show that the moon rocks reflected light, but some places in the shadows didn't, because it was being absorbed, because it was water ice. Now, if there's water ice on the moon, that means that we have water to drink for astronauts at a moon base, and we can use it to make rocket fuel instead of having to carry all of our rocket fuel up to the moon. And that's one big reason why so many countries are so interested in building missions to go back to the moon now. But that's not the whole story. There's also one more piece of the puzzle. Did you know that the biggest crater in the entire solar system is actually on the moon, and you're looking at it? You can't see it from Earth because it's on the far side. You see how we're looking from a satellite way beyond the moon back toward the Earth. And so if someone was on the moon looking at us, they couldn't see this side of the moon that we're looking at. And there's the crater, but it's been worn down. It's very, very old, right? It formed not very long after the whole moon formed itself. If you went back in time and you stood on the Earth when that crater was being made, you could have seen it happen. That impact was so big that it splashed out chunks of the inside of the moon out onto the surface. And that huge mega crater is bigger than the entire province of Ontario. And the edge of it is right at the South Pole, where the ice is in the dark shadows. So if we go to the South Pole, we can sample ancient ice, we can sample the ancient lunar crust, and we might even get pieces of the inside of the moon all in one place. So scientifically, this is a gold mine, although there isn't any gold. And Canada is going to be a part of this. Right now, the Canadian Space Agency is planning to send Canada's first lunar rover right to the South Pole area of the moon. It's being built in Stratford, Ontario right now. And last year, a team of us at Western worked together to study different areas around the moon's South Pole and try to find good landing sites. And we did a lot of what I said before. We had layers, we had data. We looked for places that weren't too steep, weren't too dark for the solar panels, and we had to make sure the lander could find a way to communicate with the Earth. We also needed to make sure that there were interesting rocks. So when we were done, we made a presentation to the Canadian Space Agency, and we told them what we found for each possible site. We said, this place looks good for X and Y. We said, this place looks bad, and we're going to hope, I hope they'll pick the spot I picked, but it'll be a while before the Canadian Space Agency makes their decision about what is the best spot. But I have to say, I'm very proud that I got the chance to help out as they decide, and I can't wait to see what we learn when this Canadian rover lands. And that's not it. There's a lot going on with the moon right now. There's actually another moon mission that Canada's participating in. So when we from Western went up to Kamastaston Crater in northern Labrador, we were working also with 4 astronauts, including the Canadian astronauts Jeremy Hansen and Jenny Gibbons. They are both assigned to the Artemis II mission. This mission is being run by NASA, but they want the help of the Canadians as well. This mission is testing out a brand new spaceship that's designed to fly all the way to the moon and back, right? It's never been tested with people before, so they need really good, smart people like these astronauts to help them test and make sure it's safe. Because one day, that same spaceship is going to take astronauts to the moon to actually land, walk around, and pick up rocks and bring them home for us to study. Kamistastron crater is a perfect place to train for moonwalks because the meteorite crashed into the same kind of rock as you find at the ancient bright white parts of the moon, like at the South Pole. That means that instead of just showing the astronauts, oh, here's a sample of a rock on a table, we can give them context of how would this look when you're actually walking around on the surface of the moon. Check this out. Here you got a picture from Apollo 17. There's an astronaut standing beside a giant moon boulder. And then there's a picture from Kamistastron crater. You see how similar it looks, how gray, how crumbly? Very similar rocks, and so it's excellent for training. This is the part where I get shivers. I have to be honest with you. The whole time I was there, I couldn't believe I was there. I grew up on a farm. I have an English degree. How did I end up getting to do this? It was a team of inspiring people, and I did my absolute best to be dependable and to help out, and I'm so grateful for having had that chance. I'm really hoping that next year I might get the chance to go back and collect more samples for my research. See, my main project right now, what I'm doing day to day, is I'm studying rocks we brought back from this crater, right? So I have a piece of a rock from the crater right here. You can see it's kind of black. I don't know if you can see it's got bubbles in it. This is lava. This is a chunk of lava that was made by the explosion when the meteorite crashed into the earth. It melted a bunch of rock. So in this piece, you see, yeah, okay, there's like little bits of rock. Okay, maybe those didn't get melted, but mostly it's just impact melt, they call it, or it's a kind of lava. But we have some other rocks we brought back. And here we see there's all different kinds of little blebs and they're different shapes, and sometimes they're different colors. And they're also lava. But why did they make these different shapes and different colors? I don't know. I just don't. So what I'm trying to do is I'm using high-tech microscopes and imaging machines to zoom way in and see what these rocks are made of and what they look like at a microscopic scale. Hopefully, I can figure out why all these blobs form differently and why they don't look like just a solid giant block of lava like this. And maybe we can learn more about how meteor craters form. And I'm telling you, well, I don't know the answer. I have to research, I have to study, I have to try and figure this out. It won't be easy to solve this puzzle. It won't always be fun. But teasing out the stories hidden in the rocks makes all the bug bites and all the hours staring at a computer worth it to me. After that, what's next? Well, who knows? I still have my original dream. But you know what? I'm doing something I love, so it doesn't matter if I get to do exactly what I thought I would do when I was 7. And you know what? Now that I've actually had the chance to meet and work with real astronauts, they help me see space exploration in a different way. And that's the last lesson that I've learned that I want to share with you. See, it doesn't matter if you're the smartest person on Earth, or the richest, or the toughest. Astronauts are all very smart, and they're very resilient, and they're very creative, and they're in great physical shape. But one person can't build a space mission by themselves. Like, yeah, you got to be resourceful, you got to be tough, but in space, nothing is possible unless we do it together. Space is not a story about an astronaut bouncing on the moon. It's a story about hundreds of people working together. The astronaut's just one person on that team. There are engineers, there are scientists, there are welders, there are programmers, there's even historians and graphic designers. All of these people come together to do different jobs that all come together to make possible something impossible, like flying all the way to the moon. And even though it's hard, space exploration ends up helping people on Earth. If we can grow food for astronauts on the moon for a moon base, well, surely we can grow it in the Arctic and feed remote communities up north. If we can do surgery remotely on an astronaut in space, well, then maybe we can help people who are far from hospitals. Right? Maybe if we build a moon base someday, we'll learn how to make a better house that's more insulated, and we can save on energy and make less carbon emissions for the climate. Maybe one of you has an idea that I don't even know about, or no one's thought about, and you can bring this in your way to help everyone together working on these projects. See, Canada's future in space is stronger when there's more people and more perspectives. Space is about cooperation. Across the whole space industry, across planetary science and all the research, there's this constellation of hardworking people. Each of them matters, and each of them's doing something different, They're not all astronauts. It's important, though, to remember that a constellation is not made up of the stars in the sky. It's made up of the connections we draw between them. So this is what I want to say. This is what got me where I am. Do things that matter. Support each other when times are tough. And try to make the world a better place for other people along the way. Do those 3 things, and you'll figure it out. Thanks a lot for listening.
Chat. Thank you so much for all of that. That was spectacular. And I loved every minute of that. But I got to say, I particularly love the picture of you out in the field because you were quite clearly the happiest guy to be there ever. Like your passion for this shone through. Just with that, I need nothing else to highlight that. If you want to come out of screen share so you can see us again, please do. Feel free. We're going to start with our Kahoot, sort of highlighting some of the things that you talked about in your talk, giving kids a chance to test their understanding and have a little fun. And so if you guys want to bring this up as a game pin, you can yell it out too in your class. And Jack, if you want to help us out with little hints when there's a few seconds to go in each of these questions, we'd love your support. But that's it. This is the faster you answer, the more points you get. And what you win is Jack and I's everlasting respect. So that's pretty cool. And then we're going to go to our Granger, Iowa schools to kick off our Q&A. If you're on YouTube, please do share as well. We're coming to everyone, but let's get started. Here we go. All right. Number 1. All right. True or false? The moon formed when a Mars-sized planet collided with the early Earth. So we showed a little visual of something early on in the presentation. It's such a great visual. I've got to say, I'm sort of giving away the game here, but like it's one of my favorite things in all of science to perceive that. And when I was a kid, that animation of that did not exist. And it is so amazing. Like it's so cool. Yeah. So yes, most of you got this right. Like, again, to think that our moon had a past where it was part of the Earth and blown off in this epic collision is wild. So fun. Sure. Jack, if there's anything else you want to add to anything I'm saying, I'll be quiet. You just tell me.
Yeah, they actually proved it. They proved that it used to be part of the Earth. When they brought back the rocks from the moon, they could tell that there were certain chemical things in them that were the same as on the Earth. And people didn't, minds were blown. Nobody thought this. When those rocks came back, every single person's head just went poof, to find out that the moon was actually once part of the Earth.
Wild. So exciting. Well, that leads us to question 2. Dark spots on the moon are what? Are they oceans of water, like water right now, not ice? Are they giant craters? Are they areas filled by recent lava activity? Or are they the eyes of the man in the moon? What do we think? Probably not that last one, as fun as that would be. So we did talk about water on the moon, but we talked about ice particularly. So not actual oceans now. It's much too cold on the moon to have water. Ooh. So tell us a little bit about the volcanic history of the moon, Jack, briefly, while we're getting ready for question 3.
Yeah. So the moon has volcanoes, or it did, just like on Earth has volcanoes. And lava came out of them, and it sprayed out onto the ground, and it spread out, and it filled in low places. And the lava is very dark, a lot like this. And so the dark areas on the moon, those are lava that came out in a volcanic eruption a long time ago.
I love it. Sorry, I'm professional detachments right out the window. I'm just grinning ear to ear. I love this program. How many people have walked on the moon? So we're talking about getting people ready to go back to the moon. Is it 12 people have walked on the moon? None, but we will soon. 130 or about 5,000. How many people have been on the moon? What do we think? Third graders.
It's very hard to get there.
It is very hard to get there. It's a multi-day journey. Yeah. We haven't been around the moon in 50 years. So 12, most of you got this right. I'm well done. So 6 missions landed on the moon, each with 2 men, all Americans, all men, and all white. And so our next moon mission is going to have a woman and a person of color. That's going to be a huge thing in the Artemis missions, which is really, really exciting. Jack also mentioned Artemis 2, which is our mission that's going to go around the moon but not land on it. You can check that out at the link below. Artemis 3 is going to land on the moon in the next few years, which is just incredible. So very exciting time. All right. Our scoreboard going to question 4. Carrying Tiger has the lead, barely, by 1 point over Smiling Dingo. Final true or false, and then we are heading to Mr. Ross's class to kick us off. So Jack has been on teams helping train astronauts to think like geologists when on the moon. True or false? We covered this. Who is listening? All right. Mr. Ross, we're coming to you guys in a minute. Get those answers in. 45 of you so far. 4 seconds left. Yes, you saw the super grin. Jack was so excited. I'd be so excited too. True, absolutely. Which is, by the way, Jeremy Hansen was on your moon mission, and every time I see Jeremy, I think that like if they're ever going to like live cast Buzz Lightyear, they'll just pick Jeremy. Like there is no person with a more lantern jaw in the history of the world ever, actually. Yeah. Let's go to our podium. Let's see what happened. And no matter what, thanks for playing along. We love that you guys took part. Social Yeti's third. Number 2, Smiling Dingo. Oh, did our winner stick all the way to the end? Let's see. It is Caring Tiger did win. Way to go. Let us know who you are in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. But we're going to head to our Granger, Iowa school number 1. Come on in, guys, and then we're going to head to you, Ms. Fudge, in a minute. Hello. Welcome in, third graders. Hi, guys. Unmute. Come chat with us. Hello. Do you have any questions about the moon? We need to hear from you. Click on that microphone. We'll be good to go. Let's see. Oh, just a little mic guy. There we are.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Do you have any questions? Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have a question you want to ask? You got to raise your hand. Keith, what's the question you have?
I have no clue.
Okay. Phoenix, do you have a question?
How many craters are on the moon?
How many craters are on the moon?
No pressure, Jack.
A lot. There's a lot. There are thousands of craters on the moon. The reason is that there's no air, there's no weather. They never erode. They never wash away. So if you make a crater, 4 billion years later, it's still there, and all the other craters since.
I've got my handy moon globe here, and so every little dot on this, all the little lines are just some of the named craters. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of them on the moon, which is a great question, guys. All right, Miss Fudge's class, we're going to head down the hall to you guys. Come on in and take us away.
Say hi.
I'm over here, guys.
Okay. Sit down.
Do you have any questions?
Third grade voices, please. Carter, nice and loud.
Why is the moon's gravity so strong?
Ooh,
Why is the moon's gravity so strong?
yeah.
Well, the moon's gravity is not as big as Earth's gravity, and different planets have different gravity based on how big they are. The more stuff they're made of, the more gravity they have. And so the moon has gravity that's more than like a little asteroid, but less than the Earth. And what it means is that when you're on the moon, you would weigh whatever you weigh right now divided by 6. So you can get a calculator and figure out how much that would be. You could jump and whoop and bounce like that because there's not as much gravity because the moon's not as big.
I love seeing the footage, and you can watch this. Kids, you can go on YouTube and look at footage of people walking on the moon, some of those 12 men that walked on the moon, and it's so odd to walk. It was one of the hardest things for the first astronauts because you're tripping over yourself because every step you take sends you that much further. It looks like a riot. Great question, guys. All right, we're going to head to our 5-6s. Clarksdale Public School. Hi, guys.
Who's got a question? Who's got one? Okay, come over here. Yep, come here. Whoever, one of you come over. Very quick. Say it right into here. Nice and loud.
How rare is a blue moon?
Ooh, what is a blue moon, Jack?
I'm not 100% sure what a blue moon actually is. I think a blue moon is I think what it is that because a month is a little bit longer than the actual time that takes for the moon to go around, sometimes you can get 2 full moons in 1 month. And I think the second one we call a blue moon. It's not actually blue.
Yeah, there you go. So you're right. I was like, I was tripped up with that too. So you're right. Second full moon in a month happens every 2 to 3 years, according to NASA. There you go. So cool question, guys. George Webster, we're going to head to you guys. Hi, grade 6s. Come on in.
Hi. So I have a question that if you why did you guys attach world's brightest flashlight onto the moon rover to see what's in the dark.
Ooh.
That's an amazing idea. Yeah, that's an amazing idea. And there's actually a thing just like this. So your ideas would be very useful in a space program. There's a satellite that's going to go up, and the satellite's going to go around the moon, and it has a special flashlight that can shine down into those craters, and it can image them, and we can learn more about what's inside. I think it's called Lunar Trailblazer, but I can't remember. I could look that up, and I could send it along to Jesse and send it to your teacher. But yeah, it's an amazing idea.
I'm going to try and look that up while we're doing the remaining Q&A. We're going to come back to every single class. And by the way, kids, I love your enthusiasm. You guys have so many questions. And if you have more when this is done that we don't get to, email us at exploring by the seat of your pants. Like, we'd love to answer all your moon questions. We can pass them along to Jack. We'll make sure that you guys are satisfied in your curiosity. Let's head back to our first group, Mr. Ross's class, WG third graders. Hi, guys. Come on back. Second question time. Hey.
All right, who's got a question? Let's see. Let's go. Ivan, question.
I got one.
Let's do one. Theo, you got one?
How far is the moon away from the sun?
How far is the moon away from the sun?
Yeah.
Well, so the moon, if this is the Earth, the moon goes around and around the Earth, and the Earth goes around and around the sun. And so the moon is about as far away from the sun as the Earth is. And so if you were standing on the moon looking at the Earth, the sun would be about the same in the sky, although the sky isn't blue because there's no air.
Yep. I want to highlight for our kids too, because on March 27th, we've got David Makepeace. He's going to come in. He's going to talk about the big eclipse happening on April 8th.
Right.
So one of the cool things about the moon and the sun, and it's just a complete fluke, is that the moon is 1/400th the sort of diameter of the sun, and it's 400 times closer. And what that means is that it can perfectly block it. That's how we get these total solar eclipses where it's daytime and then it looks like night out. So if you happen to be in this path on April 8th, it is like a once-in-a-lifetime experience. It's super, super cool. Everyone should get a chance to see it. I'm really lucky to see it where I am coming up in a little over a month. But do check that program out. It's on our website if you want to explore more. Great question, guys. All right, Miss Fudge's class. Hi, guys. Come on back in.
Liam. Yep, nice and loud, bud.
Why does the Earth have a moon?
Why does the Earth have a moon?
Yeah, great question.
Well, there's no special reason why the Earth has a moon. It's because that when the planets were forming, some other planet crashed into the Earth and splashed a bunch of material into space. There's no special reason that had to happen. It's just a fluke of the solar system. If you know about the planet Venus, it's almost the same size as Earth, and it doesn't have a moon. And it must have been that nothing crashed into it.
I'm so glad you mentioned another planet that doesn't have one. And then some of the big planets like Jupiter and Saturn have dozens of moons or hundreds of moons, which is wild, right? They're really big, so they can capture other things going around them. And this is stuff that you'll get to in later grades in your education. But I love that question. We've actually never had that one in any of our moon programs ever. So thanks, guys. All right, we're going to do two more to wrap up. Clarksdale, come on in, guys, and take us away.
No, you weren't here for that. Anybody's got a question? Come here, Dean. Do you have a question?
No. I was here.
Okay, Nihu. Quick.
Go
ahead.
How long does it take for a full solar eclipse to happen?
Ooh. How long does it take for a full solar eclipse, Jack?
Okay, so the start of a solar eclipse is when the moon is just starting to go in front of the sun. And the end is when it's just finally not touching the sun anymore. And that process takes a few hours. But the part that we all really like, the exciting part, is when it finally comes directly over top. And once it blocks it out completely, that's called totality. And that's when the sky gets dark and the birds get confused and you feel the temperature go down. That only lasts maybe 3 minutes. So it's a little tiny moment in time, but the whole process is maybe an hour or two.
Yeah, I think here in Newfoundland it's like 2.5 minutes when it actually comes to our neck of the woods, and like it's so tiny, but it's so spectacular. And I want to note too, just for our kids that might be in the path of an eclipse, you do need special glasses to watch it. So make sure you're not looking at an eclipse just with your eyes. You can actually really damage your eyes, which is a good fact to know in advance, I suppose. George Webster, we're going to come to you guys to wrap up in just a second. I want to note again, just a huge thank you to the entire team at the Western University Institute of Earth and Space Exploration. So much to explore and discover there. Just before this program, we got some news on ARM Academy, which is a joint conjunction program between them, Mission Control Space Services, and STEAM Labs. I really encourage you to check this out. If you want to do like a sample moving around with a Mars rover arm, robotic arm to do space exploration, you can check out armacademy.ca. I will link that into all our classes at the end, as well as the websites for all those great groups. So there's lots of opportunity to keep learning going, and you can email us if you have any more moon questions. But let's wrap up with one more, and then we're going to bring in all our classes in a minute to say thank you and farewell. George Webster, come on in. Hey.
So what's the steps to get your job?
Ooh.
You have to not want to make a lot of money. Kidding. So what I needed to be able to do a PhD, grad school, is I needed to have a really good foundational knowledge. So I had to go to university and take a university degree, right? And for me, because I want to do planetary science, I did geology. You could also do physics. You could do other things that are more close to what you care about. And then you could find your way to something that is more your project instead of mine. Like some people, they might want to do computer simulations. Like remember when you saw the planets collide? Somebody made that code to render that to see it. And that's a different way of doing planetary science. The main important thing is you have to go to university and you have to get a degree.
For Jack's job specifically, but as you mentioned, and I love this in space programs, there are so many different roles if you want to be involved in space. If you want to be an artist or a business person or a lawyer or whatever, there's like a myriad of jobs out there for you at the Canadian Space Agency, at NASA, and beyond. So truly, if you're keen on space, follow along. It's like the coolest time to be interested in space ever. We are sending astronauts back to the moon. We're planning for Mars. We're sending robots all around the solar system. Like, it's awesome. So get involved and check out some of our broadcasts to see what's out there for some other cool jobs in the meantime. Jack, this has been so much fun. Time flies when you're having fun. So we are nearing the end of our period classes for all our groups. So I'm going to bring them in and say a big thank you and farewell. It has been such a pleasure having you talk about the moon. And we're going to have the classes say the same. So WG, our double class is there. Rob.